Welcome to Battlefield Chronicles. Have you ever wondered what it truly feels like to be the hunter, becoming the hunted, at 50,000 feet, chasing a phantom that technology says you can't catch? Now, let's turn back time and discover the story of a world that once existed. Your gloved hands are sweating inside your flight suit. You're strapped into the pilot seat of an F-15 Eagle, an aircraft designed for one purpose: to augment the sky. But right now, you are being humbled. Far above you, a silver glint catches the sunday. It's a Syrian MiG-25 Foxbat, a machine of mythic speed, flying at an altitude and velocity that feels like a personal insult. Your radar paints him as a fleeting contact, a ghost streaking across your screen at nearly 3 times the speed of sound. He's untouchable, a phantom from a nightmare. Your mission is clear: intercept and destroy. But doctrine is clashing with reality. Your Eagle, the undisputed king of the dogfight, was built for turning and burning in the thicker air below. Up here, in the coffin corner, the air is too thin. Your controls feel sluggish. Your powerful engines starved for oxygen. You push the throttles to their stops, feeling the raw vibration of the afterburners kicking in, forcing your fighter to climb, to claw its way higher. The jet shudders, protesting as it nears its operational ceiling. On your tactical display, the Foxbat is a symbol of Soviet audacity. It represents the terror that gripped Western intelligence for a decade, the belief in an unstoppable superfighter. Your wingman's voice crackles over the radio, strained and tense. He sees it too. This isn't a fight, it's a pursuit of a phantom. And as you struggle to gain altitude, to get your missile to see the target, you understand the cold, hard question this moment poses. What happens when the world's greatest fighter jet comes up against a monster built to simply outrun everything? To understand the ghost you're chasing, you have to rewind. You have to pull back from the cockpit, back from the thin, cold air over the Middle East, and look at a map of a world divided. The year is not 1982, but 1960. The fear isn't of a lone reconnaissance jet, but of armadas, of nuclear-armed bombers. In the strategic planning rooms of Washington and Moscow, a single terrifying phrase dominated every calculation: the bomber will always get through. For a world holding its breath under the shadow of mutually assured destruction, this was an unacceptable reality. America's solution was to lean into the problem, to create a bomber so advanced it would render all defenses obsolete. It was a machine born from science fiction. The XB-70 Valkyrie. Imagine a colossal delta-winged harbinger of doom, 6 massive engines pushing it to speeds over Mach 3 at altitudes of 70,000 feet. It was designed to be untouchable, a silver spear that could outrun any missile, outclimb any fighter, and deliver a nuclear payload deep inside the Soviet Union before anyone could react. For the Kremlin, the Valkyrie was more than a weapon. It was an existential crisis. Their entire air defense network was built to stop waves of subsonic B-52 seconds. Against the B-70, their fighters were useless, their missiles too slow. It was a checkmate scenario, a technological gap that threatened to unravel the entire balance of power. In response, the Soviet Air Defense Forces issued a desperate requirement. They didn't ask for a fighter. They asked for a missile that a man could sit in. They needed an anti-bomber weapon system, a pure interceptor capable of a brute force sprint to the edge of space. Agility was irrelevant. Loiter time was a luxury. The only things that mattered were speed, altitude, and the power to carry massive radar and even bigger missiles. This was the crucible that forged the MiG-25 Foxbat. The engineers at the Mikoyan-Gurevich Design Bureau were not told to build a peer to the American F-4 Phantom. They were told to build a Valkyrie killer. Every design choice was made in service of that one, singular goal. And even though the B-70 program was eventually canceled, its ghost lived on. The Soviets continued development, creating a machine whose performance figures, when they were finally glimpsed by the West, seemed to defy the laws of physics. They had built the answer to a question no one was asking anymore, leaving the world with a terrifying solution in search of a problem. On one side of the Iron Curtain, you have the result of that singular, obsessive quest: the MiG MiG-25. To a pilot's eye, it is a magnificent beast, but a fundamentally flawed one. It's less an aircraft and more a rocket engine with wings attached. Its heart is a pair of massive Tumansky R-15 turbojets, monstrous things that gulp fuel at an astonishing rate, designed for a short, violent burst of acceleration. To cope with the skin-searing heat of Mach 3 flight, Western intelligence assumed it was made of exotic titanium. The reality was far more pragmatic, more Russian. It was mostly nickel-steel alloy, heavy and crude, welded together by hand. This made the Foxbat incredibly heavy, sacrificing all semblance of agility for straight-line survivability. Its avionics followed the same philosophy. The Smerche radar in its nose was immensely powerful, a brute force system using antiquated vacuum tubes that could reportedly cook a rabbit at 1,000 yards. It could burn through electronic jamming with sheer, raw power, but it was clumsy, designed to detect a city-sized bomber, not a nimble fighter. It was a dragster, built for one thing and one thing only, a glorious, hypersonic sprint. On the other side, you have America's answer. The F-15 Eagle was born from a different kind of fear. Not the fear of a single super bomber, but the bitter lessons learned in the skies over Vietnam, where heavy American F-4 Phantoms found themselves outmaneuvered by smaller, more agile MiGs. The U.S. Air Force's mantra for the F-15 program became legendary: not a pound for air to ground. This aircraft would be a dedicated, thoroughbred air superiority fighter, with no compromises. Its two Pratt & Whitney F-100 engines gave it a thrust-to-weight ratio greater than 1:1, meaning it could, for the first time, accelerate while climbing straight up. Its massive wing area and blended body gave it incredible turning performance. Where the Foxbat was a battering ram, the Eagle was a rapier. Its APG-63 pulse Doppler radar was a technological marvel, a sophisticated instrument that could look down and distinguish a low-flying enemy aircraft from the ground, clutter below it. A critical look-down, shoot-down capability that was pure science fiction to a MiG-25 pilot. It was a hunter, designed with a 360-degree bubble canopy for unparalleled visibility, placing the pilot as the master of his domain. Two completely different machines, born from two opposing doctrines, were now set on a collision course. An aircraft is nothing without a doctrine to guide it. Both the Eagle and the Foxbat were pieces on a global chessboard, and their designers intended them to be used in profoundly different ways. The primary battleground they were designed for was the Fulda Gap in Germany, the expected flashpoint of a Third World War. There, in the crowded, hostile skies over Europe, their opposing philosophies would have met head-on. The Soviet doctrine for the MiG-25 was one of rigid, centralized control. Foxbat pilots were not trained to be swashbuckling aces. They were considered systems operators, the final link in a vast, ground-based air defense network. A MiG-25 pilot would be vectored towards a target by a GCI, a ground control intercept station. His job was to follow their instructions to the letter. Light the afterburners, accelerate in a straight line, climb to a designated altitude, allow his powerful but simple radar to lock onto the target painted for him, launch his enormous R-40 missiles from dozens of miles away, and then turn and run, using his speed as the ultimate defense. There was no room for improvisation. The targets were never other fighters. The Foxbat was a strategic asset, a defensive queen held in reserve to eliminate NATO's most valuable pieces. High-altitude reconnaissance planes like the SR-71 or lumbering AWACS command posts that were the eyes and ears of the entire Allied air fleet. In the American corner, the doctrine was the complete opposite, built on flexibility and empowering the pilot. The F-15 was the heart of the new air superiority concept. Its mission was offensive, to sweep the skies clean of enemy aircraft. F-15 pilots were trained to be autonomous hunters. Guided by their own advanced radar and supported by AWACS, they were expected to dominate their patch of sky, making their own tactical decisions in the heat of battle. The Eagle was designed to give its pilot options. He could use its look-down divided by shoot-down radar and AIM-7 Sparrow missiles to engage from beyond visual range. Or he could get into a turning, visual range knife fight, and use his AIM-9 sidewinders and 20mm Vulcan cannon. The F-15 was a master of the entire air combat spectrum, while the MiG-25 pilot was a pawn, albeit a powerful one, in a grand, pre-scripted game. The F-15 pilot was the player, given the tools and the freedom to win. But before this clash of doctrines could happen over Europe, it would be tested in a proxy war, in the hot, clear skies of the Middle East. Before the doctrines could be tested in open combat, the legend of the Foxbat was cemented by a series of chilling encounters. The year is 1971. You are an Israeli Air Force pilot, strapped into an F-4 Phantom, the most capable Western fighter in the sky. Your ground control screams a warning. A high-speed, high-altitude contact is approaching from Egypt. You push your throttles forward, climbing to meet the threat. But as the target appears on your radar, the numbers seem impossible. It's moving at over Mach 2.5 and flying at an altitude you can barely reach. This is your first encounter with a Soviet-piloted MiG-25R, the reconnaissance variant of the Foxbat. You do everything your training has taught you. You lock on, firing your AIM-7 Sparrow missiles in a desperate attempt to intercept. But you can only watch in disbelief as the missiles try, and fail, to close the distance. They run out of energy, falling uselessly back to Earth, while the MiG-25 continues on its course, its silver contrail, a line drawn across the sky, mocking your efforts. It overflies the most sensitive Israeli military sites with complete impunity, and there is nothing you can do to stop it. This was the Phantom's nightmare, a series of events that sent a shockwave through the Pentagon and accelerated America's F-15 program. The West had seen the ghost, and they knew they needed a ghost hunter. Then, on September 6, 1976, the ghost landed. In one of the most dramatic events of the Cold War, a Soviet Air Defense Forces pilot, Lieutenant Viktor Belenko, broke away from his squadron and flew his MiG-25P interceptor on a daring, low-level flight to Hakodate, Japan, and defected. For Western intelligence, this was a windfall beyond their wildest dreams. For years, they had analyzed the Foxbat through the hazy lens of satellite imagery and radar tracks. Now, they had the machine itself. American and Japanese engineers swarmed the aircraft, carefully disassembling it piece by piece. The myth began to unravel. They discovered not a lightweight titanium frame, but a heavy, hand-welded steel body. They found not advanced solid-state electronics, but powerful, primitive vacuum tubes. They saw the massive Tumansky engines for what they were: incredibly thirsty power plants designed for a short dash, not a prolonged fight. The Phantom was unmasked. It was not a nimble superfighter, but a brute force interceptor, built for a mission that no longer existed. The fear was replaced by understanding, and with that understanding came a new confidence. With the Foxbat's secrets laid bare, the game changed. You are back in the cockpit of an Israeli F-15, the Baz. But this is no longer a desperate, panicked chase. It is a calculated hunt. Israeli tacticians, armed with the intelligence from Belenko's jet, devised a new strategy. They knew the MiG-25 couldn't maneuver, that its engines could flame out under negative Gs, and that its massive radar was blind to anything flying below it against the ground clutter. The key was not to chase the Foxbat into its high-altitude sanctuary, but to lure it down into the Eagle's world. The trap was set. On a clear day over Lebanon, your squadron flies a baiting formation. You stay low, letting Syrian radar see you, making them think you are a flight of older, more vulnerable aircraft. Just as predicted, their ground controllers dispatch a MiG-25 to intercept, seeing an easy, high-speed kill. The Syrian pilot descends, lining up for a slash attack, his world confined to the narrow cone of his radar. He never sees the real threat. From below and to his side, you and your wingman pull up into a vertical climb. Your F-100 engines engage their afterburners with a gut-wrenching roar, and your Eagle leaps skyward. Not just climbing, but accelerating. The hunter has become the hunted. The Syrian pilot, seeing your F-15 seconds suddenly appear, does the only thing his training allows. he tries to run. He pulls back on the stick, intending to use his raw power to escape to the safety of the stratosphere. But this time, it's different. You are right behind him. Your sophisticated radar cuts through the electronic noise, holding a solid lock. The tone screams in your ear. You squeeze the trigger. Fox 1. An AIM-7 Sparrow missile leaps from your wing, its rocket motor a brilliant flash as it guides itself directly to the target. The explosion is a silent, distant puff of black smoke, and the phantom that terrified a generation of pilots tumbles from the sky. This victory was not an isolated incident. During the massive air battles over Lebanon's Bekaa Valley in 1982, the Israeli Air Force orchestrated a masterpiece of modern air warfare. Their F-15 seconds and F-16 seconds, networked with E-2 Hawkeye AWACS planes, decimated the Syrian Air Force. Several more MiG-25 seconds fell, their rigid, ground-controlled tactics proving utterly useless against the dynamic, flexible, and technologically superior Israeli force. The duel was over. Doctrine and technology had been tested in the crucible of combat, and the F-15 Eagle had emerged as the undisputed king of the sky. The duels over the Bekaa Valley left an indelible mark on the history of air combat. The outcome was a stark and unambiguous lesson written in fire across the sky. The F-15 Eagle's combat record, particularly in Israeli hands, became the stuff of legend, achieving over 100 aerial victories with 0 losses in air-to-air combat, a record that stands to this day. It was a vindication of the American design philosophy. The investment in advanced avionics, superior pilot training, and a flexible, maneuverable airframe had paid off spectacularly. The Eagle was no longer just a fighter jet. It was the global benchmark for air superiority, a symbol of Western technological dominance that would be sought after by allied nations for decades to come. Its design DNA, that perfect balance of power, agility, and situational awareness, would heavily influence the next generation of fighters around the world. For the MiG-25, its legacy is more complex. The shattering of its myth did not render it obsolete. Instead, it was finally understood for what it was, a brilliant, if narrow, solution to a very specific problem. While it failed as a dogfighter, its incredible speed and altitude kept it relevant as a reconnaissance platform and interceptor in many air forces for years. More importantly, the lessons learned from its combat debut in the Middle East were not lost on Soviet designers. They recognized the fatal flaws in their rigid GCI doctrine and the technological shortcomings of the Foxbat's radar. This realization spurred the development of its successor, the MiG-31 Foxhound. The Foxhound was a true evolution, pairing the MiG-25's legendary performance with a revolutionary phased array radar system, giving it the look-down divided by shoot-down capability its predecessor so desperately lacked. The Foxbat, therefore, served as a crucial, if painful, stepping stone in the evolution of Soviet air defense. Ultimately, the clash between the Eagle and the Foxbat was more than a contest of machines. It was a war of ideas. It proved that the raw statistics of speed and altitude mean little when faced with a more comprehensive and adaptable combat system. The victory belonged not just to the better aircraft, but to the better doctrine, where the empowered pilot, supported by superior awareness and technology, could overcome a foe with a singular, brute force advantage. It was a lesson that would echo through the design halls and war colleges of every major power, reshaping the very definition of what it meant to control the sky. The skies where these titans once clashed are quiet now, etched only by the contrails of commercial airliners. The tension of the Cold War has receded into our history books, and these incredible machines, once the absolute pinnacle of destructive power, have become museum pieces and footnotes in dusty archives. Their story, however, is a powerful reminder that every piece of military hardware is the physical embodiment of a nation's fears, its ambitions, and its philosophies. The journey from a strategist's drawing board to a pilot's harrowing ordeal in the thin, cold air of the stratosphere is a testament to human ingenuity and the immense stakes of a world divided. The echoes of the Eagle and the Foxbat still linger, a whisper of a past forged in fire and smoke, reminding us of the fine line between technological marvel and historical relic.